time has expired. I thank the member. Is the motion seconded?
It is.
The motion is seconded, and I call the member for North Sydney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is a pleasure to second this motion, and I congratulate the member for Griffiths for moving what is, I think, both a timely and important resolution in relation to the situation faced by Muslims in Myanmar, particularly in Rakhine State. It's timely because the UN Human Rights Council is currently considering what action it should take following a report from its Special Rapporteur. But it's also important because the clear evidence is that there is a large segment of the Myanmar population, the Muslims in Rakhine, who are experiencing systematic discrimination and abuse of their human rights. Madam Deputy Speaker, Myanmar is a country in transition. After so many decades of military rule, it has seen for the first time the election of a democratic parliament. And I think that for many of us around the world, along with its own people, we have watched the progress towards democracy with both concern but also inspiration, as we've seen so many Myanmar residents maintain that commitment to see democracy achieved in their own country. And of course, no person has been more central to that than Aung San Suu Kyi, who is genuinely a hero to her own people, but also an emblem for all of us around the world who believe that democracy is fundamental to the human rights and dignity of mankind that we all seek to achieve. We should, however, not assume that the election of a democratic parliament is the end of that process. In so many ways, it's just the beginning. And as the member for Griffith alluded to, there are so many challenges facing this new government. It is effectively seeking to create a new civil administration from scratch after so many years of military rule. It faces a situation where the constitution it inherited still gives extraordinary control to the military, reflected in the fact that they have 25% of the seats in Parliament and a guaranteed right to control most of the defence and security departments and ministerial portfolios. It faces the internal conflicts that have racked Burma and now Myanmar for so many years, and has established a peace process to try and tackle those issues. And most fundamentally, of course of all, it faces those extraordinary economic and social challenges of lifting a nation that has been isolated for so long back into the path of economic and social development. None of those challenges, however, in any way relinquish the obligations that the new Myanmar government has to work towards ensuring that human rights are extended to all its people. And what we have seen as an international community is clear evidence of the fact that those human rights, to the extent that they exist in Myanmar, are not being extended to the Muslim communities of Rakhine State. And as the member for Griffith mentioned, we have had the opportunity to observe this firsthand through those of us that were privileged to be invited by the Save the Children Fund to travel to Myanmar earlier this year. The delegation's purpose was actually to look at foreign aid and the work of our aid agencies generally, but it was not possible to be there without the issue of Muslims in Rakhine State looming large on our agenda. And we did have the opportunity to meet with senior officials both in the national and state government of Rakhine, with aid agencies, with the UN personnel on the ground, and perhaps most importantly of all, with many members of the local Muslim community, in this instance that were some of the 120,000 people that are currently living in IDC camps across Rakhine State. What is evident from that is that there are both systematic human rights abuses occurring, which are reflected in some basic things like access to education and healthcare, where members of IDC camps were simply not allowed to use hospital facilities in Sitwe, even in life-threatening circumstances, where people's movement across the state is restricted, and in many cases they are deprived the ability to leave those IDC camps, and where access to the normal institutions of civil society is completely denied to those members of the Muslim community. More dramatically, however, we saw evidence of the systematic misuse of the military's power and the rape and burning of villages, and in some cases murder, that the member for Griffiths alluded to. Madam Deputy Speaker, the pathway forward is complicated, but there is a pathway forward, and I think that the recommendations that were outlined by Kofi Annan in his report released last week provide a blueprint to achieve that. I'm pleased that the government of Aung San Suu Kyi has accepted those recommendations, but it's incumbent on us all to make sure that she lives up to the promises she's made.